I'm back. All right. Thank you. And so I wanted to let you know how tonight's presentation will be conducted in case you did not see the information and all the reminder emails we sent out in advance. We requested that any questions for tonight be sent prior to the meeting, but during the meeting, you will have an opportunity to put a question in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. And those chat questions will come after the questions already submitted have been asked and answered as best possible. So for tonight's meeting, we are lucky to have John Pietig, our Laguna Beach City Manager, as our speaker. John has been our gracious guest speaker in years past, and we are very happy he agreed to this evening, since this is most likely his last time speaking before LCC. Although, John, you will always be welcome to attend our meetings. Most everyone is aware John plans to retire at the end of June. So while he does not need an introduction, I will give a brief one. John will then speak, and then after he's finished, I will ask him the questions that we have had submitted, and then if time permits, we'll get to all the ones in the chat also. So before working in Laguna Beach, John worked as a deputy city manager in Alhambra and budget director in Riverside. He holds a master's in public administration from Syracuse University and a bachelor's in business administration from Washington State University. John lives with his wife Peggy and his sons Daniel and Jacob up on top of the world, where many of our members live. So John was selected to be city manager in 2010 after an executive search gathered over 100 applications. For the 9 years prior to 2010, John had served as Laguna Beach's assistant city manager and worked on such difficult projects as sewer improvements, homeless shelter establishment, renovating Heisler Park, developing a new lifeguards headquarters, and many more projects. Most of these still continue on, and yet many other projects have been accomplished under John's leadership. John is respected for seeing the big picture, yet knowing the details. And without further ado, I would like to introduce John, and he'll give us his presentation, and then we'll go to questions. So take it away, John.
Thank you, Gail. I did prepare a little brief PowerPoint presentation if Gene allows such things, but he would have to allow me to share my screen.
Start over here. Oh,
yeah.
It says Laguna. I can see Laguna Canyon Conservancy, March 1st, 2001.
That sounds like the right one. We'll go with that one.
Okay.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to your questions. I've just got a relatively brief presentation just to hit some of the things that are going on in town and then get to your questions. So earlier, as the meeting was starting up, we heard that Gene and Johanna have been able to get their second shots of the vaccine, which is fantastic, and congratulations to them. And I'd like to see all of you get your shots if you haven't already. So just as a reminder, you can get shots at Disneyland, SoCa, or the Anaheim Convention Center. SoCa now has a drive-through line, if that's a better option for folks. Disneyland is going to be closing down during part of the week to add some mobility options for people that want to drive through. I think they're still going to do sit-down shots as well. And then the Anaheim Convention Center is going to do sit-down shots. And of course, as we all know from watching the news, one of the biggest challenges has been supply. I mean, there's a number of logistical challenges, but getting Pfizer, Moderna, or now Johnson & Johnson, which was just approved over the weekend and should start rolling in later this week, that has been a significant challenge for everybody. If you're not aware of it, or if you haven't already signed up, I encourage you to sign up on the Athena app, and that is an app that is for Orange County residents. It's had some challenges, but it's getting better. And then the other app that is more of a statewide app is called My Turn. And the county and the state are still trying to figure out whether you're going to be able to use both or just Athena within Orange County. But either way, I just encourage people to get on the list. They're vaccinating people over 65, essential workers, and teachers. There are a number of logistical issues and policies that do seem to change from one week to the next. Presently, they're requiring a portion of the vaccine to go to the educational community, then a portion that's supposed to go to essential workers, and then eventually as they work through the age groups to everybody else. The pharmacies are also coming online this week. Blue Cross Blue Shield is responsible for disseminating the vaccine throughout the state. And very soon CVS, Walgreens, and other pharmacies are going to come online as well. So, and as we work through the night, if there are other questions about this, I'll do my best to try and answer them. But the bottom line is please sign up and please get vaccinated. Just want to give, Jean told me just to touch on environmental topics that might be of interest to everybody. So I've got a few of them just to give you a brief and get you up to speed. But obviously, most of you were probably leaders in the effort in this community to preserve the open space. And what a wonderful accomplishment for the community and the region. And we now have about 22,000 acres of open space surrounding us. Some of it was purchased with city funds, some of it coupled with Prop 12. And then once those properties are purchased, they've been typically turned over to the county to manage. They were leased to the county at no charge. They would manage them and take the liability. Well, one of the reasons I bring this up tonight is the county has decided that they no longer want to accept any new open space parcels, which is extremely disappointing to me. And not only that, when the city tried to turn over some of the parcels we've acquired in the last 3 or 4 years, they wanted us to accept the indemnity for all the parcels that had already been leased to the county. I was furious, to say the least. I was not able to break the logjam, but there's no way in the world we were going to accept liability when these are regional parks. And Laguna Beach led the way to establish them and to preserve them, and to now turn back on us and say that we have to now accept the indemnity or the liability for them and indemnify the county just makes no sense to me. So I'm not happy with that. But nonetheless, we have to deal with it on a going forward basis. So they're still managing all the other parcels we've leased to them. They're still taking on the liability. But in the future, if we acquire more parcels, we will not likely be able to turn them over to the county. So that's going to have to change our thinking a little bit as to which parcels we acquire and why. But to be honest, you all have just done a fantastic job assembling this area, preserving it. So most of the hard work has been done, but it is a little discouraging to have the county take that position. Probably a lot of you attended the council meeting on February 23rd, where we talked about fuel modifications. So just a quick update on that for anybody that didn't make it. You know, when you're surrounded by 22,000 acres of open space, it's a great thing, but it also presents challenges for the community and concerns related to wildfire. So at that meeting, there were two key components of the program. One was a voluntary program for people that want to conduct some kind of fuel modification on their property, but don't want to go to design review. The city council did approve that process going forward, and it does limit certain type of trees and other species that can be utilized in fuel modification plans. But these are typically plans that people are voluntarily submitting because their insurance companies are giving them a hard time, they're concerned, or just plain want to try and improve their property in a safe way as possible, and they just don't want to go to DR to do it. The other component of it had to do with limitations when people build new development or major remodels. And I think this was even more contentious, and there was concern about the broader environmental impacts. So the city council said that we need to conduct an initial study before we move forward and bring those results back to the city council. So that's just one of the things that's going on. I thought many of you are aware of it, so I just mentioned it. Before the meeting, I did receive a request for an update on the parking structure study for the village entrance site. So this would be the parking structure up against the toe of the slope. Some of the early design concepts would incorporate the digester building as a feature into that. Obviously, no surprise, there's controversy with this project ongoing for over 3 decades now, and I'm sure there'll be controversy over the parking structure. Staff is out evaluating proposals that were received for the design and the entitlement process, and will probably return to the city council in June with some kind of recommendation to move forward. Another thing you may have heard of is community choice energy, also called community choice aggregation. And this goes all the way back to deregulation of the electric utility when Gray Davis was the governor. And one of the things he did was deregulate the transmission line. So it's like a superhighway for electricity. And what that allowed was a buyer and a seller to exchange electricity and transmit it over the transmission system. So it opened it up to where municipalities could purchase their own electricity from producers of their own choice. And there is an effort going on led by the city of Irvine to get a group of cities, a consortium together to set up a community choice energy organization. And that organization would then plan for and purchase the power necessary for its member agencies. And the primary advantage of a program like this is that people can buy power from green sources if that's what they want to do. There's really not much savings associated with the program, maybe 1%, 2% at most. But if you buy green energy, there's not going to be a savings, but it allows you to make the choice as a community. So you're going to hear more about this. Mayor Pro Tem Kemp and Councilmember Weiss are working on this. They're going to be bringing a report back to the City Council sometime this summer. But that's what that's all about. It's a choice. We've looked at it 2 or 3 times over the years, but Irvine's leading a more comprehensive effort right now to see what we can do regionally. Now, just a side note, as a coastal community, we're an organization that the other cities want to have because our climate is more moderate than the inland cities, and more moderate climates do not use as much peak energy. So we're a bit of a prized partner being a coastal community. And I'm sure that'll be considered as we look at all the options and what might make sense for Laguna. Also, recently in February, we had a 2 or 3 hour workshop with the City Council to talk about our sewer system. When we talk about the environment, preserving the ocean is certainly near the top of that list as well with our open space. And our sewer system is complex, it's old, and always a challenge. So I want to talk just a little bit about some of the things going on to try and address issues. And many of you recall in November of 2019, we had a 1.7 million gallon sewage spill during Thanksgiving and during a very rainy week. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So the sewer system involves your house, your sewage goes into a collection system in the street. Those pipes drain to about 23 different lift stations throughout the city. And then those lift stations pump it into one big pipe that ranges from 21 inches to 27 inches. It goes from the city hall area. It actually takes into account all the sewage from Emerald Bay, from the city, it pushes it south all the way to Aliso Creek and then out to the treatment plant in Aliso Creek. And so we call this big pipe that's 21 to 27 inches the North Coast Interceptor. And it is a single pipe, one pipe in the ground. It transmits 2 million gallons of sewage each day. Some portions of it are under pressure, some portions of it operate on gravity. It was installed around 1987. It's about 34 years old, and the design life is typically about 50 years, but they can last longer than that. The real problem with this single pipe design is that we can't inspect that pipe during the year because it would take a multi-million-dollar bypass system to bypass this pipe, get cameras in it, look at it. And anytime there's a crack, a break, or damage to the pipe, we generally cannot fix it until we've drained it and reduced the pressure. That's possible in certain gravity sections of the pipe. We might be able to make a quick repair, but most of the time it would require us to drain it before we could repair it. Now, this is the system that most of the cities throughout California use. But really, when you consider that we're a coastal community with so much to protect off our coast, our ocean, our marine protection areas, the City Council has said we need to study replacing this single pipe with a dual pipe system. And that would allow us to switch back and forth through a system of valves between the two pipes if we do have a rupture or break in the future, would allow us to be able to maintain the pipes better going forward. But it's going to be a huge project. It's over $30 million. Right now, the estimates are it could take 5 years at 9 months each year, which is unacceptable. That is not going to work for our community. So the City Council has said, okay, we think we need to explore this. We know it's expensive. We're willing to consider funding it, but we got to go back, find a better way to construct it and put it in so that we can better protect the coast. We had 15 miles of coastline closed in Thanksgiving. And can you imagine what would happen if that was in July? Because we had coastline closed from Dana Point to Newport Beach. So it's quite a challenge to improve this. It's probably a 10-year project. It's very expensive, but the council said it's time to study it and figure out what we can do, especially because the current system is getting toward the end of its useful life. And when you can't inspect it, its reliability starts to come into question. So what you have on the screen here is we kind of have 5 reaches of the pipe that we broke up for engineering purposes. But I've talked about mostly this reach here, the first 4 reaches that kind of go along the coast. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this reach that goes out to the coastal treatment plant. This reach is the first one to be replaced, and the City Council did authorize us to move forward with some financing and some conceptual plans. We do not yet have plans, but in general, the line right now is in the creek, literally in the creek, and that is not a good place for your sewer pipe infrastructure to be. So the plans are going to have to take it out of the creek and put in a new 2-barrel system that's going to have greater reliability going forward. But again, this is going to be a huge project and certainly would impact the golf course and the other areas in the canyon. But the council has said, go ahead, start looking at it, start designing it, start putting in place the applications to finance it, and let's see what we can do. So we're looking at 2 18-inch pipes, potentially somewhere in this area, but a design is not even a conceptual design has been developed yet. And of course, you do have to pay for those type of infrastructure improvements. So basically, the community is looking at 5 to 6% rate increases for the next probably 15 years if all these improvements are put in place. But again, that's really a small price to pay, I think, in the end for maintaining the ocean, maintaining the quality of life, and also protecting the rest of the region from sewer spills. I also want to call to your attention, and I know a lot of you are aware of this, but the pandemic and social media have brought a lot of, let's say, unappreciated challenges to our community. We have, especially with the pandemic and the shutdown of gyms and other exercise and outdoor activities, well, not outdoor activities, but indoor activities. We have what seems to be a record number of people coming to our beaches, coming to our trailheads, coming to our neighborhoods for parking, and that's caused a lot of problems throughout the town. And as many of you know, there has been a number of city staff and city council efforts to meet with neighborhoods, hear these concerns, and put together a program to address them. Now, I am going to be a little general in my comments because I live up in the top of the world area, and so I'm recused from dealing with those issues directly. So the Assistant City Manager, Sheree Dupuy, and Council Member Kemp, and the new police chief, the new director of public works, and a number of city team members are working on a program to bring back to the city council on March 9th to appropriate a significant amount of funding to try and address these issues. So just in general, there are cries for additional policing, trash service, signage to encourage visitors to respect the rights of the neighbors, graffiti removal, parking services, and combined with that, the staff is looking at possible new programs to help address plastics and other litter and debris in the, not only on land, but in the ocean. So they're going to be reviewing possible policies that could be considered regarding single-use plastic containers and straws and expanding the regulations that the city has currently. Also, refillable water bottle stations. Again, this will be at the March 9th City Council meeting, a week from tomorrow night. And it would be paid for by taxes and fees on the visitors. So Measure LL was a 2% increase in the bed tax that was passed by the city 3 or 4 years ago, and then also a recent increase in parking fees that just went into effect here in February. And those sources will generate approximately $1 million to help pay for additional staffing and contractor services to address these issues. So I think many, many people in our town are impacted by these things. And so if you can, you're going to want to participate in the March 9th meeting to see the recommendations and the options and the program going forward. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to try and answer any questions related to these topics or other topics of interest to the group. And so thank you very much, Gail and Jean, and everybody for the opportunity to present a few items to get you up to speed, and I'll be happy to take some questions.
John, I need to unmute Gail, so let me find her amongst this throng of people here. Let's see, where the heck is she? Okay, I found her. I'm asking her to unmute herself.
Thank you, Gene. He is our Zoom master. Well, John, your last point is a focus of a couple of questions we did have regarding this tourist surge that we've been getting, and even more so during the pandemic. I had a number of questions along that same topic. For example, and you answered some of the questions, you know, what the city should be doing to better balance revenue collected from the visitors with the additional costs the city incurs providing public safety and other city services to visitors. And then what you think, how the city can increase staff for parks, lifeguards, police and fire to accommodate these tourists. And you mentioned where the funds could come from. And then a related question is the visitors overwhelming the North Laguna Boulevard area and the trailheads in the north end of Alta Laguna Boulevard. They're the most actively used part of the Laguna Greenbelt. So now part of the Aliso and Wood Canyons Wilderness Park. In 1988, it had county approval for an 108 home gated community development. But thanks to environmental groups, the 471 acres were purchased by the city for $4 million, mostly from state environmental bond position number 70. Shouldn't the city provide park rangers assistance to manage this city-owned property? So that's a specific question that you possibly can answer about providing park rangers assistance.
Sure. And on March 9th, you're going to see much more detail regarding these programs. But the park ranger should be provided by the county. It's a regional park. It's used by people not just from Laguna Beach, but from Aliso Viejo. As I said, I live up in the top of the world area. Generally, at least once a week, I hike the trails at the end of Alta Laguna Boulevard. So one of the steps that we're working on in the program that I mentioned is reaching out to the county, specifically Supervisor Bartlett, and asking for additional park rangers. Now, that's only part of it. So the other thing that we're looking at is adding police officers, both sworn and non-sworn. We're looking at adding lifeguards down along the coast to deal with the beach issues. We're looking at adding either personnel or contractors to deal with trash removal, graffiti removal. They're even going to look at the park hours to determine if they can be reduced at nighttime to eliminate the potential for inappropriate behavior and actions. One of the most difficult things is parking. Because the Coastal Commission oversees much of Laguna Beach's land use policy, and they are very against residential parking permit programs. We're very limited in what we can do there, but there are some ideas. The council has recently approved a program to allow red curbs to be painted on corners to improve visibility, and a number of other things I think are going to be considered. And again, I can't go into too much detail in the Alta Laguna area specifically, but those are some of the things that are being worked on. So not only park rangers from the county, but then the city can do some things with both non-sworn and sworn police personnel, contractors, and other city staff. And all of those things are being looked at by a broad team that has been focusing on it for the last probably 2 or 3 weeks as a result of really some, I think, some very passionate input we received from a number of neighborhoods. And I know Jean was involved recently with some of it, and I've seen it, and I certainly understand the pleas and the concerns. And it's going to be a bit pricey, but the program is going to be put forth in March, when much of it can probably be implemented before the summer.
Well, thank you, John. But that, just to summarize then, if a resident were interested in trying to work with the city or, you know, have some policy for parking up there, what would you encourage a resident to do to participate or to, get their opinions known?
There's two things. First, show up March 9th and make your voice known, or make sure that representatives of any groups that you're a part of are there speaking for you, like Towna or other groups, so that they can speak and share the concerns. Most likely, parking issues are going to need to go through the Parking, Traffic, and Circulation Commission. And the reason is for every person that wants a parking meter or a blocked parking space, there's somebody else that doesn't want it to be the space blocked in front of their home or across the street where their friends or neighbors park or visit, or where they park their vehicles because they can't get them all on site. So generally, parking restrictions and changes to them go through the Parking, Traffic, and Circulation Commission process so that all sides have an opportunity to be heard.
Great, thank you very much. And I want to remind the audience that if you have questions, put them in chat. Jean is going to accumulate them. I'm going to switch to a different topic that interests the LCC. Mapping of blue line streams in South Laguna and the Laguna Canyon annexation specific plan have been on and off the city's priority project list for decades. What are the main reasons this has not been accomplished, and do you see this project being accomplished soon? Blue line mapping.
Yeah, great question. Well, blue line mapping and the specific plan have been put off the last several years because it has taken so long to complete the downtown specific plan, the historic preservation ordinance, short-term lodging. Those different processes took more than 5 years in most, if not all, of those cases. So what the city council had done some years ago is decided that they wanted to dig into these type of land use and quality of life issues, but there was too much to be done all at once. So the idea was prioritize them, complete the first batch, and then move on. And the Laguna Canyon specific plan is in the latter part of that list. But because it takes so long to get new policies approved in this community, we haven't been able to get to them. So that's part of it. The blue line streams really has a little bit of a different history. Some years ago, and this is probably going back maybe even more than 20 years ago, but I'd say 17 to 20 years ago, there was a plan that the city had put together that I'm generally aware of. I don't know all the details, but there was a plan that the community had approved and the council had approved to map different courses. And it went to the Coastal Commission and they sent it back with too comprehensive of changes so that almost every stream, many of them even typically dry stream beds, would have been mapped, and that would have changed the appeal areas and the amount of regulation that the Coastal Commission could have. And it was so bad that the city just withdrew the application and quit working on it in its entirety. But now it has come back up. I understand there might be some interest in trying to focus it just on specific areas, maybe not make it as broad citywide, and see if there's some support to get it through. So that is on the list of things that need to be done. But until we get through the other things that we still haven't finished, it's going to be several more years until we can get to it. So hopefully it'll be quicker than that. But really, we have to start finishing what we start. We have to start finishing what we've already started. There are also some mandated things that we have to do. So the state is mandating that we have to update our safety element, that we have to update our housing element. So those things now have to get done per state law before we can take on new projects. So that's a quick status scale. I'm not sure it's what everybody wants to hear, but it's the practical reality. When it takes so long for decisions to be made in the community, there's only so much we can do other than prioritize and try to move forward.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we all think things are easier than they look, I'm sure. But okay, let's go on to a question regarding the committee. The city formed a committee called the Laguna Canyon Road Task Force. And there was a document of recommendations recorded. Are any of the specific task force recommendations being implemented? If so, what and when can residents expect in the future the task force road improvements will be completed? Does that make
Yeah, no, I
situation?
understand the question. Yeah, there was a committee formed. I don't remember how many years ago now, probably 3 to 5 years ago, probably closer 4 to 6. And they produced a report. And then since then, another study has been done and completed on looking at the concepts for Laguna Canyon Road. And this included whether the road should be expanded in terms of vehicular lanes, pedestrian lanes, bike lanes, whether there should be things undergrounded, whether there should be transit lanes or express lanes that could be switchable, all those different things. It was somewhat related to the effort to pass a sales tax measure to underground more utilities as well, because a portion of the area that would have been undergrounded would have been Laguna Canyon Road. So that study also has turned into consideration of whether or not the city should acquire Laguna Canyon Road from the state. So that study will probably be coming back to the city council this summer. So some of the other smaller recommendations for Laguna Canyon Road may have been implemented, but most of them are significant that would require reconfiguration of the road that either Caltrans does not want to do the way Laguna Beach thinks it should be done. So then Laguna Beach has to make a decision if they want to try to take it over. But in order to do that, you've got to come up with probably $1 million a year or more to fund the road repair expenses and take on the liability of a road that's not designed for the level of vehicles that are traveling on it. So there is work still being done on those things, but the process to make any improvements is not going to be easy. You could probably, as a community, I think you can work with Caltrans and get some things done. But as a community, we may not be able to support the level of improvements Caltrans would want to make. So then that's going to present a conundrum. Can you come up with something that Caltrans will support, or are you willing to tax yourselves in one way or another to take over the road and pay for it? And that also leads to a discussion of the utility poles along Laguna Canyon Route. That's one of the key routes in and out of the town. It's a key evacuation route, number one, in a wildfire, but it's also a key ingress route for mutual aid equipment. You know, if we have the town catch on fire like it did in '93, we're going to need to accept mutual aid from the entire region and the entire southern portion of California, if not throughout the state of California and beyond. So those are important considerations for the community, but there are some really nice plans that talk about options to improve Laguna Canyon Road, but that would require money and control of the road or agreement with Caltrans.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a topic that's been in the news lately. Do you have any insight as to what will happen to the many properties that Laguna Beach Company has possibly defaulted on? Especially, what is the current status of the Hotel Laguna? Is the city working with Mr. Honecker or other current owners on facilitating any transition? And is it true that Mr. Honecker owes a significant debt to the city of Laguna Beach? And if so, how much debt, and what is the city doing to recover the debt?
Yes, okay. In no particular order, Mr. Honecker does owe back taxes to the city approaching $700,000, and the city has been in collection discussions previously he was going through a family court process. The city was involved in that with a potential receiver to try and collect, but at that point, a settlement was reached. So now we are working through other efforts. We are in contact with Mr. Honecker. And we're prepared to take legal action to collect if we need to. Those discussions are ongoing. Mr. Honecker has been dealing with a number of court cases, and I don't have intimate details, but he has recently reached out wanting to start meeting with city staff again to get these projects moving forward. So they certainly have been on hold for a period of time. I'm sure both due to Mr. Honecker's own legal problems as well as the pandemic. But there has been, just in the last couple of weeks, some interest in trying to get them to move ahead. And I think as a community, we should want those properties to be improved. Now, I understand we want them to be with the right improvements that maintain the character of the community, but we also have to understand that a lot of these properties were dilapidated and nobody was stepping forward to improve them for the last 5+ years. How long was the Hotel Laguna vacant before Mo came in to step up and try to improve it? I'm not going to say that he's done everything right. We all would have loved to have seen to have those properties developed by now and developed appropriately. But that has not happened. But I think it is critical to our downtown to get some of our marquee properties improved in a way that's representative of the community character. But our downtown needs help. We've been dealing with the Amazon effect prior to the pandemic and now the pandemic. So as a community, my thoughts is that you're going to have to evolve. We're going to need to find a way to get good businesses into this town, to maintain a good quality of life while at the same time preserving our character. But there are significant changes in the marketplace occurring with Amazon, with the pandemic, et cetera. And it needs to be addressed. So Rivian is buying the movie theater, and they're converting it to kind of a car company and a meeting area to show off some of their new electric vehicles. I think that's great for Laguna Beach. And there was a settlement in the last week or so with some of the people who had concerns about the environmental processing of the project. So it'd be nice to get that back up and operating into something productive. But I had spent 5 years working with the prior owner as well as Mayor Whalen, trying to encourage him to sell it to somebody that would improve it. But it did not move forward quickly. So all I can tell you at the moment is that just in the last couple of weeks, Mr. Honecker has started to reach out. We haven't even had the conversation yet. And of course, the conversation is going to need to start with him taking care of his outstanding obligations with the city.
Okay, so we don't know about the Hotel Laguna yet, for sure.
Well, we don't have an exact timeline yet. I mean, there are still some improvements going on, I think, to just try and get it open, but we need to get back together with Mr. Honecker after the pandemic and see what the timeline is. Now, this isn't the master renovation of the hotel. This is more of a facelift to get it open. And I think there are broader plans and concepts that he wants to work on in the future. But the pandemic has also made all of this much, much more challenging.
Agreed. Okay, all right. The issues of needing affordable housing and more artist live-work situations have been identified for many years in Laguna Beach, yet seem impossible to solve. The recent the RHNA RENA mandate to cities, particularly Laguna has an allotment of 393 units, which is pretty challenging. What do you think are the best solution or solutions for addressing this need in Laguna Beach?
Well, like everything, there's passionately held views about housing. As a professional local government manager for more than 30 years, I think it's a terrible land use process when the state usurps local control. And so to just require increases in density without any consideration to its impact on the environment or the infrastructure is poor planning, in my opinion. Nonetheless, when the state mandates something, it becomes a law and we have to follow it. So in terms of RENA, the most likely place the zoning would allow those units to be would be probably along the coastal commercial corridor. And the initial step the city would have to take is to zone for those units. It's not clear to me if and when they will be built. But here's another example of one size fits all state land use policy being applied to Laguna Beach, which is largely a built out community, one with highly valued and treasured views, one with great environmental open space and ocean. And so I, for one, am not very supportive of this type of state level planning approach, but the staff is working on it. There are possible solutions that may be tolerable. Now, I say that at the same time, knowing that many of our seniors, our artists, and our low-income citizens need affordable places to live. So I don't want to indicate that that's not important and that's not a priority, but I don't think it should be mandated through these one-size-fits-all state policies, in my opinion. So the RENA figures were challenged by probably around a dozen cities, including Laguna Beach. We challenged and appealed them to an organization called SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments. They basically glanced at us and they did not approve a single appeal of any cities, which unfortunately was anticipated. So it's a very difficult issue. While I understand the need for housing, I think we could do a better job locally of trying to address these things, but I'm not even sure the allocation that was assigned to Laguna Beach is in any way realistic or fair, but we have to deal with it.
Okay, okay. I have a specific question along the lines of projects. What safeguards are in place to preserve the integrity of proposed projects when a city's employee member is the applicant, especially when the city employee is in a supervisory position? What safeguards are in place to guarantee the city employee, once recused, has no access to plans and batch emails to the design review board and or planning commission boards and city councils? So what safeguards are in place?
Well, it sounds like a loaded question to a large extent, so I'm going to answer it very generally. In general, if an employee has an interest or bias or a conflict, then they typically need to identify it and recuse themselves. That doesn't mean that they don't have the rights to participate as an applicant or a property owner or a citizen. So without more specifics, which probably I couldn't get into anyway, I don't have a more specific answer, but the city employees, we have ethical standards, conflict of interest codes, and all those different things that we need to comply with. And to my knowledge, most city employees do. But I will also tell you there are often allegations that are investigated. Most of the time, they're not found to be supported. But if somebody has a specific issue about something they think that's going on that's inappropriate, then they need to let me know and we can investigate it.
Okay, okay. So along the lines of city employees, please explain how the city expects to move forward with the unfunded pension liability. What do you think should be done to remedy this debt obstacle moving forward?
Yeah, so the unfunded pension liability is an interesting animal, and it goes back to 2000 when theoretically the state said that all the pension funds were superfunded and local government should give away more benefits to the employees because it's never going to cost anything. There were no employee or employer contributions at the time, and it was a terrible decision. I was against it back around that time, and then in another city I was working in. But I think elected officials were given some inaccurate information and it moved forward. So now we end up where we are now. So in Laguna Beach, we've done a number of things to try and reduce our unfunded pension liability. We prepay early. When no rate increases are coming, we schedule out 3 to 5 years for those rate increases, even before they're put in place. And if we have additional revenues, we prepay, like you could prepay on your mortgage to try and buy down the unfunded liability in that way. Just at the last city council meeting on February 23rd, the city council authorized a study. And I want to be very careful here not to be misinterpreted, a study of what's called pension obligation bonds. And it has to do with, because the interest rates are so low right now, that some cities throughout the state are issuing pension bonds at probably a few percent interest to pay off the unfunded liability, which is generally incurring interest at a rate of 7% or more through PERS. So that interest gap could present an opportunity to borrow at a lower interest rate, pay down your debt, and save millions of dollars. And a lot of cities have done it. A lot of other cities and financial institutions express great caution in approaching something like that because of economic fluctuations, and you never know exactly how things are going to perform. But those are some of the things we're doing as a community to try and address the unfunded pension liability. Another thing that happened probably 5 to 7 years ago was something called PEPRA, and it was Public Employees Reform Pension Act. I don't remember the exact acronym. But what that did is that created 2 sets of employees. So there's the classic employees that have these historic benefits, and then going forward, there's a new set of employees. They don't have quite as good of benefits. They contribute more to those benefits. And all those different things will help reduce the unfunded liability to a manageable level at some point in the future. But in the meantime, there are going to be increases in those costs. And coupled with the other tools that we're looking at doing, that's how we're doing our best to try and buy down that unfunded liability as soon as possible.
Right. Okay, a question regarding LCAD growing out in the canyon. How has LCAD, Laguna Canyon Art and Design, continued to grow without a master plan in place? Do you know?
Well, there's been a number of master plans over the years in various conceptual stages. And then I think oftentimes in a town like Laguna, where land is so scarce, you can develop a master plan, but if you can't put the parcels together or you can't raise the money, then you become a business that operates more on an opportunistic basis. And I think that's what you've seen LCAD do with the Big Bend campus. And there've been a number of other issues, and the city has talked to LCAD in the last 10 years. You know, are there opportunities to collaborate on Act 5? Could Act 5 be a parking lot to help the college 8 or 9 months a year, and then use the spaces that were previously used by the college for the community during the summer to support the transit system and the festivals? And all those discussions have been held. And I've seen, like I said, various conceptual master plans from time to time, or we've discussed them with various people at the college, but assembling large amounts of land in Laguna Beach is extremely difficult to do. So I think what you've seen instead is where the college saw some opportunities to acquire existing properties and buildings and improve them and make them part of kind of a spread out campus.
Okay. So we have a question in chat. And then I have one more question on my list, but I think I'll read you the question from chat. It pertains what you mentioned about Caltrans or offering the city the opportunity to own Laguna Canyon Road, and that you mentioned the pros and cons or some of them. But should the city of Laguna Beach take control of 133 as a private road, would it be possible to implement a toll road with profits going to road improvements and undergrounding? So let's say we did acquire it.
I don't know the answer to that yet. And that's one of the things in the brainstorming sessions that have come up. And I don't know whether the laws would need to change. It has been, I think it's mentioned in some of the concept reports I referred to earlier. What we don't know at the moment is whether that is legal or whether it would require a legislative change. So, I mean, that's something that could be debated in the future. I just don't know the answer right now.
Okay. Well, I remember before they put the toll roads in, we had to have people voting and we had to have all kinds of changes going through. So obviously Laguna Canyon changing to a toll road would be quite interesting and quite the topic. So, okay, well, let me see. That covers mostly my questions. I have a summary question. As you leave your position in June, what will you miss most about being Laguna Beach's city manager? And what do you wish you had been able to accomplish that still is not done?
Well, the second list is too long, so I'm not even going to get into that.
Well, then you have to stay.
You know, what am I going to miss the most? So my wife and I, before we even started dating, came down to Laguna Beach in early 90s with groups of friends for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day and various holidays and celebrations. My wife grew up in California. She came here previously with her family. So it's always been a special place, and it still is a special place. And at some point, we will miss that if we end up relocating somewhere or something like that. So the beauty of Laguna Beach, all that it has to offer, from the hills to the ocean, from the charming downtown, all those things. We've raised our family here. We've met some really wonderful people. The school system's been great. Laguna Beach is a gem, but it's a hard one to polish, hard one to improve. So anyway, there's still so many things that are special about the community that we love, and will always be here. So we would, if we ever have to leave, we will miss those things. In terms of the list of things that aren't done, the list is extremely long, and I think I referenced it earlier, you know, as a community, we got to find better ways to make decisions. Now, I have no illusions that we're going to get greater consensus on a lot of these very, very difficult issues that our community face. Property rights versus historicity, quality of life issues. They're not easily resolved, but when it takes 5 years or more to put together ordinances, that's also not serving our community well, because it's taking up too many of our resources. I think that should be spent doing other things to help improve the community. So the list of things that really still need to be done is long. And frankly, it always will be. It doesn't matter who's the city manager. It doesn't matter how long they've been the city manager. There are always things to be done. Times always change, and there are things that need to be addressed. So it will never be static. It will never be done, but it will always be special.
Well, thank you, John. I know for all of the ups and downs you've gone through, and our group in particular is a group that likes to have a voice and be heard, and we appreciate you listening. And, you know, we really do appreciate your time and your service, and we wish you and your family the best. I can't tell you how much it's meant to have you come and talk to us tonight, when I'm sure you're so busy with getting done what you need to get done before you retire. So thank you again, and thank you for all your information. It's been great. So we'll say goodnight and thank you, and wish you well in your next chapter. So thanks
right.
again.
Thank you
Okay?
very much, Gail and Jean and everybody else, for having me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank
Let's hear
you.
for John Pietig. Come on.
Yes. We'll have an applause.
Yay. Thank you,
Thank you all
John.
very much. You have a great night.
Thank you. All right, good night. Well, thank you all for being here. I just want to remind you, our next speaker in the next month is Norm Grossman from Laguna Greenbelt. That's going to be April 5th. So we'll be sending out notices. And thank you all for your attendance tonight and for your questions. I hope everybody got their answers as best possible. So I want to wish you all a happy March. Get your vaccines, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Marcia.
Bye, Alice. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, wow. She looks like some ghost. Keep rid of him.
What you doing, girly?
Don't call me girly.
Huh? Oh, God, I'm sorry. That was my dog. I didn't know you could hear me still. What you doing, girly? Get off. Sorry.
We're going to take a quick time out. We'll be back. More of the Women Tell All right after this.
Thanks, everybody.